Welcome to the Freelance Journalism Podcast. We're trying out something new at the pod with an Ask Me Anything episode, and I'm thrilled to be here for this experiment with my colleague and friend, Shernay Williams. Welcome, Shernay.
Thank you, Katherine. Pleasure to be here with you. I'm really excited for this episode. I know that we get lots of questions from members here at the Institute for Independent Journalists. Hard times right now for everyone, including in the journalism industry, and they want to know about everything from how we manage our time to how we stand out as freelancers. But the main one, and Katherine, I know that you always get this, how do you find clients, right? That is the question we always get. So let's start there. And I'll ask you, Katherine, what's your advice for finding new clients?
So, first of all, if you have been a journalist for more than 2 or 3 years, you already know so many more people than you think. And that is the first place to start when finding new clients. So Emma Karugrovum, who's part of the IAJ, likes to say it's her tour of her favorite people, where you just make a list of everyone you know or have ever worked with, even folks from different circles like your church or your community groups, your sports teams, neighborhood, because you never know who knows someone who needs a communications professional. And then systematically go through that list and reach out, ask to meet over coffee or have a half an hour Zoom because you're reaching out for new clients and you'd love to share what you're looking for and hear how they are. So you want to be transparent going into these calls so you're not kind of sandbagging someone with a professional call, but it's the best way to get people's attention focused on you. I know we talk a lot about social media marketing and posting on LinkedIn, and I do believe that's helpful because it reminds people you exist, but it's those one-on-one conversations where you reach out, you activate your network, you remind people what you're looking for. They may not have a sense of exactly what kinds of clients you want. And then over the course of weeks and months, you will start to learn who in your network is the most responsive, who just has a brain that works that way, that they send you leads and they just know how to put two and two together. And those are the folks that you can draw closer and have more frequent connections with and catch up with more, because some people are just bad networkers. And it's not personal. It doesn't mean they don't love you, but it does mean that they're not a fruitful use of your time if you're looking for new clients. In addition to that network map and reaching out and having the systematic way of connecting with folks in your network, I do think it's helpful to pay attention to what worked in the past and do more of it. So if you think back to how you previously found clients, was it going in person to networking events or to conferences? Was it paying for ads? You know, if you have a commodity service like wedding photography, where you're always looking for new clients, it may help you to actually run a advertising campaign on Meta and think about what is your particular niche, and then how does that fit into your marketing strategy and your sales strategy. And the final thing I'll say is that often people say, well, I'm a journalist, I could do anything. That is not helpful for your networking contacts. They want to know 2 or 3 specific types of clients you're looking for so they can put you in a mental box and send you those leads. So yes, we can do anything, but it helps to have concrete asks of maybe you're looking for magazine editors who are looking for reported features on the environment, and you're looking for communications organizations that want white paper writers. And maybe you're also looking for an anchor gig doing, ongoing editing or something. So having a clear ask is also really important. I don't know, Shernay, what your experience has been, if you have anything to add to that.
Oh, I absolutely agree with all of that. And I would just say that focus on the local side of things in the beginning. That was the most helpful for me. And like you were saying, having those face-to-face conversations, because online there's so much competition, right? But if you think about it, your local news outlets, they really need support at this time. And so that's a great way to get started. So I always tell people to start there. And when we talk about revenue streams, I'll talk about a little bit more about even thinking outside of journalism. And I also like that you said that we're comms professionals, because we don't have to stick ourselves in that one box.
And why don't you double down and share a bit more about that? You know, it's easy to focus on journalism, freelancing, but what are other kinds of revenue streams that we should be going after?
Yes, and I highly recommend it because there's a lot of competition, but a lot of freelance journalists that I know, they don't just do journalism, right? So that's one of their revenue streams. But as comms professionals, we can do anything, like you said, which can be a negative because it's you can do anything, but it's important to really sit down and reflect on what you're most passionate about as well. And so for me, that looks like sitting down and saying, okay, what are my skills that I want to execute right now? So that could be, I want to focus on writing and editing. That could be video. That could be photography. And think about different organizations that can benefit from those skills, right? So you could write and edit for a nonprofit's website, right? You can do consulting for them when it comes to editorial writing. You can teach, right? You can teach journalism. So there's so many opportunities. And I highly recommend, like you said, those coffee dates, really seeing what companies are interested in and what they're looking for and seeing how that can fit into your desires. Chambers of commerce in your local area are also great resources. I find that whenever I go to those sessions, I'm the only one with these skills as far as writing and storytelling. So they tend to gravitate like, oh, wow, I need help with this, especially smaller ones. So that's another opportunity as well. Maybe it's, going with a startup or a small organization that's growing and they don't have a communications team yet. That's really going to be beneficial for you as a freelancer to tap in and provide those resources for them.
Right. The things we do falling off a log, other people are super intimidated by. So it's a good differentiator.
Good. And so the next question we always get is how much to charge, which can vary. But Katherine, I know that you talk about the importance of looking at that hourly rate. Most clients pay per project or per word. Can you explain about how we can think about charging?
Yes. So this is after how to find clients. This is the number 2 most common question that I get is, what do you charge? And the answer is actually pretty simple because as freelancers, we are trading our time for money. So we always should know what we're getting for that time. So even if you're not charging by the hour, you should have an internal hourly rate that you calculate for every assignment or gig or client so that you can stay accountable for how much you need to earn. And to get to that from the project rate, it helps to start with a discovery call with the client. And this can just be 10 or 15 minutes on the phone, but it gives you such a better opportunity to position yourself as a competitive candidate for the gig and to charge accurately. So some people would prefer to just answer by email and say, this is my rate, take it or leave it. That is a mistake. I do not recommend it. Instead, ask the client to jump on a phone call or a Zoom, even better, for 10 or 15 minutes. And in addition to getting more accurate information, you're starting to build a relationship with that client. You're showing them that you are a human with lots of real skills and that you're going to be enjoyable to work with. You also are going to go through your new client checklist, which is something that we teach in the IAJ's programming, and it's free and available, all on our website and our newsletter. And these are the most common time sinks for any project that will help you to price and charge accurately. So for example, an article that you write that's supposed to be 1,000 words, that could be anywhere from a 5-hour project to a 300-hour project, depending on what the client expects in the depth of reporting, the number of sources, the amount of fact checking, the number of edits and revisions. If you're going to provide photography or photo contacts, help the photo editor track down people. So those are all the questions that are on our new client checklist, and you'll develop your own based on your work and what you've learned are the most common open areas, the sort of black holes of time where your project ends up getting sucked in and you lose a lot of money because you haven't accounted for it, and then your hourly rate goes lower and lower. You also can identify any red flags in that initial discovery call. Like, for example, suddenly you start to realize there's 5 people involved in this approval process, or maybe they don't really know what they want. And so not only are you doing the work, but you're scoping it and you're actually doing more communications consulting for them, which maybe you could charge more for. So all of these things happen in that discovery call. And if you do the same kind of work often enough, you can go through it very quickly. And then when it comes to writing a contract for that work, you're going to be able to price it much more accurately. Simple math, you think about the hourly rate that you want. You multiply it by the number of hours this project should take based on your discovery call. I always add 10 or 15% for the unknowns, right? In my head, I don't have to make all this visible to the client. And then you give the client a project rate in a contract that also lays out all of your skills and experience and why you're the best person for this. And again, it can be just a 1-page document that makes the case for you. It's a sales document for you. It also proactively sets some boundaries about when you are or aren't available, when they expect this project to happen. Maybe what are your work hours, right? And you can put all of that into this document so that you're beginning the relationship with really healthy boundaries on your time and shared expectations about what this project actually entails. So I know, Shernay, you also have a lot of experience with writing your own contracts. Anything you want to add to that answer?
No, that's exactly it. I always say just to be aware of scope creep, and making sure that you have outlined all these things in the beginning can reduce that. And scope creep, we've all experienced it. It's really like this project is taking a lot more time than I thought it would. They're asking for more things that I was planning. And so you want to spell out in your contracts what happens in that scenario. So I learned to put that in there. So usually I'm going to be charging per project. But if I have in my mind how many hours it should take me. And so I'll spell that out and say, listen, if I go above, this amount of hours, I'm going to be charging an hourly rate above that. And so that kind of puts it in their mind to make sure that we have this conversation ahead of time and, go from there. So really important.
Yes. And now when it comes to journalism, a lot of freelancing can be around pitching. I actually recommend that folks have a minority of their business as pitching and more of it with anchor clients, but we all end up having to pitch. What are the ways that you would advise folks to make their pitches stand out and actually capture an editor's attention so they get read and not just sent into the junk folder?
And I really do have to plug for all the content that we've had here. I've learned so much because on this podcast, we speak with editors. We have workshops throughout the year, many of them free, and we have editors as well as our conference. And so I think it's really important to first see what that editor wants from that outlet that you're going to be pitching, because they have similar things that they want, but everyone has their own thing. Like, I don't mind getting, social media DMs versus someone else might say, please do not DM me. So the first thing is to be clear about that actual publication, what those editors are looking for. What'd you say?
Do your homework.
Do your homework, not only with the editors, but also the type of content and stories that they already have on their site. So that's what I always hear from them, right? They say, please make sure that you've read our content so that you're not pitching something that we already have. That'll help you stand out because obviously those get deleted immediately. But also I hear that you should keep it short and sweet for the most part, that you want to pitch an actual story, not a topic, right? So they also want you to dive deeper. And then you also want to explain why you're the best person to write this, because many outlets, they have staff writers. So you have to present something different than a staff writer can. And that really can tie into, depending on the story, right? Your unique background, your previous experience covering the topic, but really think creatively about and strategically about why you're the best person to tell this story. Anything else you want to add, Katherine?
Oh, yeah, 100% what you said. The 3 questions you need to answer in that pitch are why this story for this publication, right? What's the unique angle, something new you're adding? Why now? If there's a peg or some kind of news hook, it makes it much more likely you'll get a yes. And why me? Do you have access to documents or a source? Do you have expertise? So make sure you answer those in like 400 words or less, unless it's a really involved long feature, and make it impossible to say no.
Definitely. All right, so I think I have the next question right. So a new client asked for a quote to edit a white paper. How should I price that project? How do I make sure I'm not asking for too much or too little?
This is a question we just got through the Business of Freelancing course, and it is so common. So this is another reason I'll plug the discovery call, because if you're on the phone or Zoom, you get that real-time feedback when you're talking budget. Ideally, you're the one who asks them what is their budget for this. And one of the most elegant ways I heard this recently was, can you give me a sense of your budget so that I understand the depth and the level of project that this is, and I'm not pitching too high or too involved or too simple of a project. So that makes it a little bit more nuanced, that you're not just saying, I'm going to try and get as much money out of you as I possibly can. But if you ask them for their budget first, then you get a better sense. And I've had this happen where I went into a conversation thinking I would charge $5,000 or $6,000, and they said our budget is 10. So then I wanted to charge 10, right? Why would I take less? And of course, I'm going to deliver the value that they're expecting, but you have the advantage in the negotiation if you don't speak first. If they ask you and you feel like you have to say a rate, you can always wait. You can always use that discovery call to say, let's talk through the elements and I'll need to think about it, and then I'll send you a quote by email. Or you can give a range on the phone, and then again, you get this real-time feedback of, what you say the range is. And if they're like agreeing right away, you priced yourself too low. And if they do a bit of a double take, you can always be flexible. So if you haven't done a specific project before, I would say that's the real red flag. If you have not edited a white paper before, please do your homework and make sure you understand what you're getting yourself into before you give a quote. So in that case, in fact, for most editing jobs, I ask for a sample to be able to see what the material is before I give a quote. So I would say, can you give me an example of a previous white paper that this might look like? And what are the raw materials that you typically give the contractor? Because then you can see how big a gap there is between what they give you and what you're expected to deliver. And then you can do the math to figure out how many hours that will take you times your hourly rate in order to come up with that. And the other thing I would say is, when you have your internal hourly rate, just remember, as freelancers, we have to pay our health insurance. We contribute to our retirement funds. We have to account for times if we get sick or we can't work or we want to take vacation. So that hourly rate in our minds should be higher than what we would be paid full-time for an equivalent job. Also, because full-time employees get benefits, which are typically about 50% of the compensation package. So if you look at what you made in a full-time job for this role, you're going to divide that into the hours and then at least add 50% to what your internal hourly rate is because of the benefits. And then frankly, they don't commit to you. They don't have to use you again. So as contractors, we should be getting compensated for the risk that we take in running our own businesses. So we talked a lot about how to get a client. Shernay, how should you go about thinking, I may need to drop this client, which is a question we recently got. And I actually don't think we get this question enough because it's important.
It really is important. And it can be painful, especially if you're in a position where you feel like you need clients, you need that income coming in. And so it can be challenging to know when to drop a client, but there probably are going to be times that you need to drop a client. And even if you want to reframe it, because maybe you're in a particular period in your life where, your anchor client is taking up a lot of your time, or maybe you even have some personal issues, you need to stay home more. And in those scenarios, maybe you want to say, for these next couple of months, I'm taking a break. So you just let the client know that this is not forever, but this is, for the next several months. And I've done that in the past and said, okay, I'm not taking any more clients for the spring, but I want to revisit and reconnect with you in the summer, and literally getting a date in the calendar for us to reconnect and see if we can work together. But then there's other situations where you may find that they're not paying on time, or there's, a tendency to have scope creep with their projects, right? Or you feel like they're unpleasant to work with, or you're not being valued. And those are scenarios where you really need to say, this is not the client for me. Because again, you are your boss. So you can just get to decide who your clients are and who you work with. And I really recommend at least once a quarter taking a survey of all of your clients and work that you've done and seeing, who is paying on time? What are these hourly rates looking like? Am I spending more time working for this client versus another client? And then this is paying off for me. And then also, we can't forget, am I enjoying this? Am I enjoying my this mix of work that I'm doing? So you definitely want to have those check-ins with yourself. And I've found a couple of times that when I did that evaluation, I had a client, I didn't mind working with them, but they were paying significantly less than my other clients, and they had no room to grow. Because of course, we always want to, every year, I'm going to reach out to my clients and say, okay, I've been working with you for a year, we've been doing really well, and try to negotiate a higher pay for, if it's a long ongoing client. And so for that particular client, they didn't have any room. And it was my lowest paying client. And then I had higher paying clients who wanted more work from me. So again, there's no hard feelings. This is a business, but I'm going to let that client go. And then, of course, always keep that door open for that. When they do get more resources, let's continue to work together at that point.
Yes. Amen.
Have you had that scenario?
Oh, yes. I mean, I think I continually am evaluating, which are my clients I want more work from and which are the ones I want to taper off. And actually, we can put in the show notes for this episode the tool that we use at the IIJ. That's this simple spreadsheet to look at what is your hourly rate, what is your target rate, who is paying you well. And I 100% agree with you, Shernay, about your values and your enjoyment, because that is important too. We teach the 3 Ps rule at the IIJ, that any gig that you take should be for pay, should be for passion, and add to your portfolio. Some may only hit one of those. Some may hit all 3, but you need to know what is your primary motivation in order to be accountable to yourself for that. And I have had experiences where I was doing a gig for pay and the client was difficult, or maybe they were kind of rude. And I calculated the hourly rate and realized, oh, wow, they're paying me like $275 an hour. I suddenly don't mind those snarky comments anymore. Right? Or something I really loved, and I did the calculation and realized, wow, I'm getting paid like $23 an hour for this. I need to limit. I don't necessarily need to fire that client, but like you said, ration them a bit. The only thing I would add is you really want to be honest. If you can't make this client work because of the pay or it's not the right fit for you, be super clear about that with them, because otherwise you're just inviting them to come back and offer you more work that you don't want, and then you have to say no again. And
maybe that will encourage them to find some more resources for you as well. So you never know.
Exactly. Right. If you don't ask for what you want, you probably won't get it.
Mm-hmm. That's right. All right. And this question comes from a freelancer in our recent Business of Freelancing course. So I'm dealing with a new client who keeps asking for additions and new information that wasn't included in the original scope of work. That's that scope creep we were talking about. So how do we go about setting that boundary without appearing as difficult?
Yes. So first of all, this is a mindset thing, right? That you have to have both setting a boundary, but also be loved and liked. And this is business, people. So if you worry too much about appearing difficult, then you're going to cheat yourself. And you're also going to make this a client relationship that doesn't work as well as it should. So really encourage, first of all, flipping that mindset to how can I be as clear as possible with this client so we both get what we need, even if that ends up being the end of the relationship. And let go of that worry that if you appear difficult or you ask for more, you ask for what you need, somehow they won't respect you. I've found, I don't know what your experience is, Shernay, but if you are professional and you have very clear expectations and deliverables, that you actually get more respect than if you're a pushover.
Yep. It literally is the exact opposite of what you would think. Yeah. Same.
Yep. And so some strategies for when you're in the mix and you realize there's a lot of scope creep going on. So first of all, go back to the agreement, right? Ideally, you've had this discovery call, you've been super clear, you have expectations and milestones and the amount of work that's involved laid out. So you can just point them back and say, I wonder if we should revisit the original agreement because it seems like there's things coming up that are not part of the original scope. Should we revisit this, expand the contract, either to expand the project rate, or I can bill for these additional changes at an hourly rate? If you are having work done on your home and you suddenly need something different than the original contract, that contractor will give you a change order, right? And they will bill you for that. So we are also contractors and we should also be open to change orders because sometimes it does happen, right? The project changes. And the sooner we call attention to that, the more we're going to be on the same page with the client. Always remember, their poor planning is not your emergency, right? And we can be as professional and kind and win-win as possible, but ultimately don't take on that burden of their poor planning as much as you're trying to solve the problem for them. It's really not your problem to solve. I also recommend choosing your medium carefully, right? If this is all coming up over email, ask to jump on a quick call because it's going to come across better on a call or a Zoom than on email. Email's very easily misinterpreted and misunderstood, and that's an easy way to sour a relationship, especially if the client's stressed and these changes are coming from things outside of their control. Even a 10-minute call will be more human and keep that relationship better than if you try to respond quickly on email. And then the last thing I would say is, just like with our toddlers, offer limited choices, right? If an editor that has been sitting on an edit for you for 3 weeks suddenly emails on a Thursday morning and says, I need this new fact included in here. Again, they don't own your time. Their per planning is not your emergency. Unless they have told you they will be editing this piece on Thursday and to stand by for questions, you can always say, I'm tied up on another project now. I can look into that on Tuesday. So the limited choice is you handle it today, editor, or I will help you with it on Tuesday. And I've often found if it's a small thing that would require me to shift gears, go back into that story that I forgot about for 3 weeks, remember what we were doing. It'll take me 2 hours to find that. The editor who's in it already, whose mind is full of it, can find that in 10 minutes. And often they'll just choose to do that rather than have to wait. So that's one other strategy that I really appreciate, that you want to be helpful, but you're not going to give them unlimited choices. Anything else around that scope creep that's worked for you, Shernay?
Well, no, I think you hit the nail on the head with all of those. We just have to remember that we're not full-timers for them, right? This is the difference. This is why we are operating our own businesses and we can make those choices and make those decisions. And like you said, give them limited choices. I also like to pose it as an opportunity. Oh, this is an opportunity for me to do more work for you. We can amend this contract, start a whole nother contract, especially if it's of interest to you, the type of work that they need in addition to what was already agreed upon. So it's an opportunity for us to work together more. Or you can just say, oh, no, I don't have the capacity.
Exactly.
For that.
Yeah. And
you get to decide.
I love that framing, Shernay, because often scope creep does come because an organization has gotten more funding or they have more demands and they don't really exactly have it built into their workflow. So if you help them identify that and build out a workflow, suddenly you have a whole new stream of revenue.
Absolutely.
So those are some of the most common questions that we have come across. Are there any others that you would throw in there, Shernay, that we haven't addressed?
I think these are the big ones.
Another one, since convention season is coming up soon, is how to approach in-person events and conventions. Like, how do you build relationships in those settings? How do you follow up afterwards? I have thoughts. I'm about to go to a big conference in a couple of weeks, but Shernay, what's on your mind when it comes to that?
I would say trying to make those connections with people. So if you're attending a session, someone mentioned something, or they have a media outlet, or they are looking for freelancers or contractors, and making that initial connection and then following up. Because for the longest time, for me, I was great with making an initial connection, but then I wouldn't stay on them as much as I needed to. And so it may feel like you're bugging them, but a lot of times you're just reminding them that you're there. We had a great conversation at that conference. Let's stay in touch. And if it's a person that you've identified as, someone that you really want to work with, I would even put it in my calendar and say, okay, once a month or once every 3 months, I'm going to follow up with this person through email, or I'm going to see what are they posting on LinkedIn. Let me see if I can comment and just kind of pop up in their mind again to explore a potential opportunity.
Yes, amen. I think people make it too precious and they're like, oh, if I didn't follow up the next week, I can't follow up at all. But honestly, sometimes it's better to wait a month because then your inbox is cleared and you've caught up on the work. So it's never too late to follow up. The other thing I would say, Jake Hilton at Lookout Publications wrote a piece recently, I think it was on LinkedIn, about how much he's raised for Lookout just from having authentic conversations at conferences, like being human, not immediately going to the sales pitch or the what you hope to get out of it, the transactional. And that I think also is super important. As journalists, we're natural reporters. So that's where we should always think about like asking questions, let our curiosity drive us, get to know this other person and build that authentic relationship so that you're not just looking for what you can get out of it. And sometimes, the sort of most important people at conferences, they just are starved for that because everyone wants something from them. So if someone else is like, if you say, I went to this great sushi spot yesterday around the corner from the conference hotel, that's the kind of thing that they actually might prefer because they get something real. It's not just the same question they're always asked. And Shernay, you and I first met at a conference.
Yes, that's so true.
And now we've been working together for years. So real relationships and collaborations can develop just from those chance encounters.
Absolutely. And it may not be immediate, right? And so maybe you make that initial connection and nothing comes out of it in the first 3 months or so, but you never know, they may refer you to someone else in the future, or, you may work with them 2 years from now. But like you said, it's about maintaining those authentic relationships. That's going to make the most difference in the long run.
So we'd love to hear what you think of this Ask Me Anything episode. If you want more like this, please send in your questions and we will do our best to oblige. I'm Katherine Reynolds Lewis. So glad to be here with Shernay Williams. And thank you all for being part of this episode. And Shernay, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
The Freelance Journalism Podcast is a production of the Institute for Independent Journalists. Our mission is the emotional and financial sustainability of freelancers of color. Learn more about our work at theiij.com and use the code POD10 for a discount on our annual conference and other events open for registration now. That's POD number 10. And please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, or both. You can find our free webinars and other offerings on YouTube. And your recommendation and sharing with friends is the greatest compliment and helps us discover new listeners. Thanks for listening.